Welcome to another episode of Construction Tech Talk, where we bridge the traditions of the trades with the innovations of the future. I'm your host, Nick Peret, and we are diving into a topic that is essential to every construction project, but often flies under the radar: insurance. Joining us is James Tasca, a property and casualty consultant working with Tonry Insurance Group, who brings a unique perspective from his tech background to the traditional world of construction insurance. Now, Tonry Insurance Group is a fourth-generation family-owned insurance agency that has supported contractors with insurance and bonding since 1926. That's right, coming up on 100 years. Now, James's journey from tech to insurance is not just about a career shift, but it's about enhancing the safety and security of construction projects with innovative insurance solutions. So stay tuned as we uncover how James is shaping the future of construction insurance, making it more accessible, understandable, and responsive to the needs of today's builders and contractors. James, my friend, thanks for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Nick.
Hey, this is going to be a great episode. This is a long time coming, so we're excited to have you on, right? So, moving into the world of insurance, especially with the construction industry, is a significant transition from your tech background, right? Since I've known you, you're always in tech, and you made this shift. It's clear that you developed a deep passion for the field too, right? From the people I've talked to, your clients, you name it, you are an insurance nerd. You love it, which is what contractors need, all right? So can you guys share, what is it that captivates you so much about insurance, right? What aspects do you like of being able to provide that protection, that peace of mind for these construction professionals and companies?
Yeah, no, and thanks again for having me. Excited to be on the show with you. I would say what's most fulfilling really is contractors. They do a dangerous job, right? And they need to be protected. And I think you put it well that not many people think of insurance. And that's my job, is to help them. It's a constant. You constantly have to learn about it. I have a great team at Tonry Insurance Group. I get to learn from the owner of the agency, who he's third generation, his daughter's fourth generation, who's going to take it over. And it's a constant learning journey. Every single day, there's something new that I learn, and just making sure that all of my clients, when they go out, whether it's to build a house, if it's to build a garage, maybe they're doing some plumbing, electricians, anything, any trade, making sure that in the worst case scenario, they're protected. That's what I love about my job.
No, it's really cool, man. I love seeing people that like what they do. But it's confusing though, isn't it? But if I was a contractor, I'm looking at all these different plans or whatever, coverage plans and stuff like that. It's a confusing process. Do you have any tips for guys who are looking to understand where to even start? Is it just give you a call, or what's the deal?
Yeah, work with an agent, have a conversation. It's definitely confusing. I get confused at times. It's all about sitting down and just reading through everything. I think the big thing to realize is that insurance policies are set up at the beginning, and anything can happen if you go to litigation, if you get lawyers involved. So you want to make sure that in the worst case scenario, you've thought about what protection you need in that worst case scenario. So yeah, I think it's work with an agent, have conversations, tell them exactly what's going on with your business, what projects you're thinking about working on, what your estimated sales are, your payroll. My favorite clients are the ones that anytime they have a question, they give me a call. And anytime I have a question for them, I can give them a call and we can discuss it and make sure that they're all set and they're going to be okay when something bad happens.
Mm-hmm. So that clear communication, for sure. That's going to help any process. Any vendor or any partner that you're working with, obviously having that clear communication is going to be a big part. And when you have a vendor who's saying, hey, give me a call, that's the way I prefer to communicate. You don't hear that very often, right? Sometimes you hire somebody and you never hear back after the sale is completed. That is great to hear. That means you actually have someone that's going to support you with any kind of questions that you have. Now, is it trade specific, would you say, or what do you think? So if I was a plumber versus I was a remodeler versus I was a custom home builder versus I was a roofing contractor, is it different kinds of plans, or is it pretty similar throughout, or how do they differentiate?
Yeah, I think the big thing is there's different carriers that prefer different risks, and you can think of risks as the different types of trades. Take like a Liberty Mutual, for example, and I'm just making this up, but say they prefer plumbers more than what's another big company like State Farm prefers electricians more, right? State Farm might not want to take any plumbers, they only want electricians,
Hmm.
or they'll take electricians, but they give better incentives to plumbers because they like that exposure. They have claims history that proves, okay, if we price it at this amount for this plumber, in the event of a claim, we're still going to be able to make our money back. And this is the statistics that show that. So it's all about finding the right carrier for you. So yeah, I would say that the different policies, they could have different exclusions, which is something that you should always talk to your agent about, making sure that if you have a certain policy, you don't have exclusions that are exactly the type of work that you do. So for instance, say you're a general contractor, you're hiring out a bunch of subcontractors. Any project could be different. And let's take like a home builder, for example. Say you do roofing, you take on a project, someone needs an addition put on, but they also need some roofing done. You want to make sure that your policy doesn't have an exclusion for roofing.
Hmm.
It's something that I see all the time. And it's
I
something
bet.
that's my job is to make sure, hey, this is your current policy. You told me you do roofing. You have an exclusion for that. In the event of you hurting anyone, the roof comes crashing down, destroys their house, it hurts the people in the house. You're not covered. So those are some things that you want to look out for as well.
So I just out of genuine curiosity, is roofing the considered the riskiest, or what trades is considered the riskiest versus the most risk averse?
Roofing is definitely the riskiest,
Yeah,
right? Home builders in general, right? If you think about putting up a structure, that's pretty high risk.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say roofing is definitely one of the more risky for sure.
I just I had to know for sure, but that's what I figured from my time in there. But you just got to think though, right? Because if it's riskier, it's probably going to be a higher cost, right? Just so that trades can understand, hey, if I'm in this trade or if I want to offer that, it's going to have a higher price point for protection because of the risk that they're taking, right?
Totally. And it depends on the type of policy too, right? Like liability, when what's the most risky, right? Like I think roofers, they're on top of a house or they're on top of a commercial building all day. That's just going to be super risky, right?
Yeah.
But then also, if you think about landscapers, sometimes if they do tree removal, they can get really high up in a tree. That's another risk as well. So it all depends on the line of business, the type of policy, workers' compensation versus general liability.
And I'm going
Yeah,
to go through those for sure, just to have an understanding of the different categories and whatnot. So everybody makes sure they can check off those different boxes that they've checked. But for you guys, then, so for Tonry Insurance Group, do you guys customize insurance solutions to minimize their exposure to risks like job site injuries, equipment damage, all that kind of stuff?
yeah. I think basically our process is when we work with a business, we want to take your current policies. So say if you haven't worked with us before, say you have a history and you already have insurance,
Hmm.
we want to take your insurance policies. We all read through them together. So we want to make sure that we understand what do you currently have. And we want to make sure that if we give you a new policy, you're not losing any coverage from what you already have.
Mm.
That's what we call an errors and omissions claim is if you sell someone without them knowing something that they thought they had coverage for, right? We'll read through all of the policies. We'll look for exclusions similar to what I just said. Are you a home builder? That's a general contractor that subs out and you have an exclusion for bodily injury and property damage for subcontractors. What does that mean?
Uh,
That means that if your subcontractors cause any bodily injury or property damage, you're going to be on, they are not going to have any coverage. That if that goes to court, that's a huge exposure for that general contractor. So that's stuff that we look for. It can be as simple, Nick, as I get all the time people that have a commercial auto policy that it's in their business's name, but they don't have a business registered with the state.
Really?
Or they have it in their business's name and they use all of their contracts as their personal name, right? So if you sign a contract with someone,
Ooh, you're
there's tons of
liable then.
different
You're not protected if you put in your personal name, right?
yeah. So basically, like someone can do work in their own. Someone can basically register their commercial vehicles in their name, their own personal name. Say it's Nick Peret,
Yeah.
registers their
Okay.
own name,
Yeah.
right? And they don't put the vehicles in as betterboss.io, right? The policy is in the name of betterboss.io. Technically, the cars that are insured are under Nick Peret, not betterboss.io.
That's a
In the
good
event of a
one.
claim,
Yeah.
yeah, and we always talk about this. It's like in the event of a small claim, it's not going to matter as much once you start talking huge dollars and people that, and this is how you have to think of it, worst case scenario, people dying or having to go through these big litigation lawsuits, everything. That's where, yeah, a name difference like that is going to make a big difference.
Yeah, because I've done that, right? Because I had a vehicle. It was a company vehicle, right? The company paid for everything, but it was technically registered under my name, I believe. That's the exact scenario. I'm sure there's guys out there that are doing that, and if they don't know this information, they could be in trouble if something happened there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. And these are all things like insurance. I'll say it 5 million times, but it's all worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're setting up a policy like that, you have to think that way.
Yeah.
What's the worst case scenario? Maybe everything would be fine if you, in your specific situation, got into a car crash. Maybe the policy was in betterboss.io's name or Peakley's, whatever, and the vehicle was in your name. Maybe the claim would go perfectly fine. You wouldn't have any problems. Maybe if it was super severe, it could.
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers can do anything.
Yeah. So what about when you're working with somebody, or if somebody out there, a listener out there, is looking for insurance? What tips do you have for like someone who's just getting started versus more of a well-established company in terms of the investment they should make and the protection that they should have, if there is a difference? And then when they're working with somebody, does having a track record help with getting what they want, or what are some of the different variables that are considered?
Yeah, totally. Keeping it as high level as possible. There are voluntary carriers and then there's excess and surplus carriers. So voluntary carriers are basically going to provide the best coverage. And to get with a voluntary carrier, yeah, you typically need to have 3 years of history.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? They need to know this person or this business has experience, they have claims history. We can get like a little snapshot of what are the number of claims that they've had, how much have they been paying. This is what we think our profit could be off of this business by signing them up. The other thing is, and I hear it all the time from the carriers, the underwriters are the people that work at the carriers that review all the submissions, is anytime that your feet are on the ground, you have a higher likelihood of getting signed with a voluntary carrier. So the main goal is that you want to get with a voluntary carrier because you're not going to have some of the exclusions that I was alluding to. So when you go to the excess and surplus market, which a lot of newer businesses will end up going to, and it's simply just because a lot of voluntary carriers won't take on this risk either because you're a roofer or it's a dangerous exposure or you're just a new business and they don't want to take that on. That's when you have to be really careful about the exclusions that can be put onto your policy. That's what my job is, to make sure that you don't get those exclusions or you get some options to see this is what the difference in pricing is if you get rid of this exclusion. If you feel like you can take that risk, here's what the pricing looks like as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all a balancing act, really.
Yeah, I bet. I want to go back to something that you said before too. So you mentioned subcontractors. All right. All right. How should we handle that? What's the difference between having an internal on your team hired through you laborer versus a subcontractor that you're hiring out?
From an insurance perspective,
Yeah.
like attractiveness from a carrier.
Well, because you just mentioned, hey, if this happens and you don't have this kind of protection, and a subcontractor, something happens to a subcontractor or a subcontractor causes damage, you might be out of luck. Is that kind of the case there?
If your policy says that.
If the
So
policy says that. So that's something to look for.
yeah, and I'll preface by saying every single policy is different. Any claim scenario is totally it's up in the air. It all depends on the policy that you have. As far as some tips for general contractors working with subcontractors, you want to make sure that you have a subcontractor agreement. You want to have a subcontractor agreement that holds you harmless and indemnifies you from anything that the subcontractor does. Another good thing to have is a waiver of subrogation. So in the event of them causing bodily injury or property damage, they will not be able to subrogate against your carrier, which means come after the carrier for money. You also want to make sure that they have certain limits on their general liability policy, typically an each occurrence limit of 1 million and a general aggregate of 2 million. And you also want to make sure to collect their certificate of insurance. And everything that I just listed is actually something that most voluntary carriers require of someone that uses subcontractors. A lot of voluntary carriers won't take on a general contractor unless they have a certain size premium and they bring their commercial auto, their workers' compensation, their umbrella. Typically, general contractors get disqualified if it's some carriers will do 25% or more of subcontracted work. Some will go up to 40%. That's the most that I've ever seen. But those are just some tips as far as working with subcontractors and how you can protect yourself as the GC.
So you mentioned umbrella, and that was a question I was going to ask you. What does the umbrella all entail, right? General liability, workers' comp. What does that umbrella all entail?
Yeah. So just kind of going through everything, like the general liability is protecting you. The best way to think about general liability is third party. So anything that you would be liable for to a third party for bodily injury, property damage, and personal and advertising injury. Workers' compensation is what it sounds like. It's for time paid off from getting hurt on the job. Commercial auto, that's auto liability. So again, third party, if you hit someone with a vehicle and you injure them or cause, that's basically what it is, right? If you hit someone with a vehicle or cause any type of property damage, that's what that covers. So what an umbrella policy does is it sits on top of all of those liability limits. Let's take commercial auto, for example. Say worst case scenario, you hit someone and you take out a, what's it called? A large telephone pole, right? Comes down, causes, those are anywhere from 250 to like $800,000, right?
Jeez.
So you have a $1 million bodily injury and property damage combined single limit. And in the process of that coming down, it also hits someone's car and kills them. And then they take you to court. That $1 million is going to get used up pretty quick. Your umbrella, say you have a $3 million umbrella policy, that's going to add $3 million more dollars once the $1 million is exhausted.
Got it. Okay.
So that's the power of an umbrella policy, is that it sits on top of all of your different policies. And once that limit is stressed, is used up, then the umbrella policy kicks in and it protects you and gives you some added coverage.
Interesting. All right. That's good to know. That's good info.
Personal insurance as well. So
okay,
like with a home, you have personal liability. So that's if someone comes to your place and they hurt themselves, that's like personal liability, something that you would owe to someone, a third party. you can have the same for an umbrella policy. And the idea there, I know we're getting a little off topic, but the idea there is to protect your net worth through the umbrella limit. So say you have like $1 million of personal liability on your homeowners, you have $4 million worth of assets between a few different homes that you want to have a $4 million umbrella to protect everything that could come if someone sued you specifically as the person.
Got it. All right. So now I want to talk about just general liability. I want to say it's a requirement for obtaining a contractor license in most states. So could you elaborate on how this coverage works and why it's so critical for construction companies and professionals to have?
Yeah, it's definitely the core of any contractor's insurance program. It covers bodily injury, property damage, and personal and advertising injury. The personal and advertising injury, you can think of that as like defamation. So if you go online and talk poorly about someone and then they end up suing you because they lost an opportunity for a job, that's just one situation.
It's
But
in
really
there.
the bottom,
That's in there. Self examples like that.
yeah, like bodily injury and property damage is really the core of that though. Because if you think of a contractor, take a home builder, if they're building a home and say the homeowner comes in and checks it out and the project, like the house, unfortunately, say a cabinet falls off, we'll be a little less morbid. A cabinet falls off, hits them, and they get hurt. A general liability can help pick that up, that this person got hurt from this. Now they're suing you, and you have protection with your general liability policy. I think something that is interesting for people to know that you wouldn't think, but in a general liability policy, you don't have protection for the work that you perform. And see you taking that picture.
Hey, I'm just getting some live action photos. People want to see behind the scenes, man.
You know,
people know how good you are at this stuff, man. And they want, I got too many requests coming in to have you on the show, and you're dropping insurance bombs, man. You're dropping the details that the people out there need to know for protection. So we're all about it. Nice work.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Nick.
Yeah.
Some things to consider with a general liability policy, though. There's the each occurrence limit, which I was saying is typically $1 million. And there's a general aggregate limit of $2 million. So keeping it as basic as possible, $1 million means the most in any one occurrence that you can have for a claim is $1 million. The general aggregate means the most in any one policy period could be $2 million. Worst case scenario, you have two claims that hit $1 million each. You have now used your general aggregate up. So yeah, that's one thing that I would say that's important for contractors is making sure that you have a per project general liability policy. And what that means is instead of having an aggregate per policy or a per policy aggregate policy, is basically you can have just those limits. Say you're a contractor that's working on 10 different projects at one time. You can have just those limits for all 10 projects. If you have a per project aggregate, you can have it for, you can basically have $1 million each occurrence, $2 million general aggregate for every single project that you're working on. That's a small tweak. It doesn't cost much to add that to your policy, and it can make the world of difference.
Yeah, no, I love it, man. Now I want to go into errors. All right. So when you're reviewing a new policy for a construction worker, what are some common themes for errors that you see on their insurance policy?
Yeah, I think it's as simple as having the wrong name of a company. Say you changed the name of your business. You went from betterboss.io to nickstheboss.io.
That is true. I am the boss. Remember that. All right.
Tasca, boss.
Remember that. I'm the boss. Don't forget it.
I remember that all the time.
Don't forget it.
Me.
All right, good. Continue.
But So say that you didn't update your insurance agent, that you made that change in your name and you just kept having your general liability policy. I see that happen.
That probably happens a lot. Stuff, this little stuff that you're talking about. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, it's really small stuff that can make the world of difference.
Yeah.
Say you ended up, for instance, you started out as Nick Peret. You're Nick Peret, the plumber, and somewhere along the line, you decided, like, I'm going to incorporate Peret Plumbing. So then you change, you file with the state, you don't tell your insurance agent, all of your policies are in Nick Peret's name. You start signing contracts as Peret Plumbing. You have a problem. You need to add Peret Plumbing. You need to add Peret Plumbing as a named insured. And then you can also keep Nick Peret as a named insured because you've also been doing work under that name as well.
Peret Plumbing's not a bad name either.
I know. I was pretty happy with that one.
I worked for a plumbing company in the summers in college. My neighbor Carl's Plumbing. I used to take out hot water heaters and take them to the dump and unload them.
I used to do the spray foam, right?
The insulation. That wasn't my dad. That was when I was a little kid. He'd take me on little fun rides out to Milwaukee, and we'd blow insulation in the attic. It'd be all on my nose and stuff like that, man. It was awesome.
Yeah. No, it sounds good. Some other things too. Massachusetts, a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, I'm based out of Massachusetts, is Massachusetts specific. One thing a lot of people don't know is limited liability companies for workers' compensation. The owners are automatically excluded from coverage. It's a state law if you have any employees that you need to have workers' compensation insurance. But if you have a limited liability company, the owner is automatically excluded from coverage unless they want to include themselves. With a corporation, an owner is automatically included unless they want to exclude themselves. So I wouldn't necessarily say that's an error, but I would say that I definitely get policies sometimes where it's like, oh, I had no idea that I was excluded from coverage.
So if an S corp got a policy, they automatically include the owner, but with an LLC, they do not.
Yeah, so an owner is automatically excluded unless they opt in for coverage.
So they have to opt in. S corp,
yep,
they automatically get you. You're already part of it.
Corporation, you would automatically have. Yeah, and then you would schedule the amount of payroll. Yeah,
got it. Cool, interesting. What was I going to do? Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about builder's risk insurance next, specifically. So that's coverages for on-site property damage. Could you provide insights on how this insurance adapts to the very needs of all these different types of construction projects, and like why it's important to really value this structure when completed?
Yeah, absolutely. Builder's risk is super important, especially for contractors. One thing that a lot of people don't know from a personal insurance side is that a homeowner's policy actually typically, depending on the amount of renovations that are occurring, you could lose your coverage if you do a certain renovation that they're not okay with. So typically, even as a homeowner, you want to make sure that you have a builder's risk policy. For a contractor, and what a builder's risk policy is covering is it's covering all of the materials that are at the work site and that are going into the finished product, into the structure. So it's a super important coverage. If you think about it, worst case scenario, say you're building a really nice, you're a home remodeler or a home builder, you're building a really nice place. You have like hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, of raw materials that are just at the work site. You want to make sure that you have coverage for that. What if someone drives by and notices? You'd have to have a pretty big truck to do this. It'd have to be really thought out.
but still though.
Yeah. So it's important. And I see it a lot of the times where people from a personal insurance side will do renovations. They'll want to add that, especially during COVID, they'll want to add that new 1,000 square feet to their 2,500 square foot house. And they're about to spend like $400,000 on it. Your homeowner's policy isn't going to cover that. And it's pretty logical when you think about it, right? A homeowner's policy is protecting the house. Okay. If you're going to change the house and go under construction, the risk exponentially increases.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an important coverage. It's important for contractors. It's important for people that have a home as well. Even taking it a step further, for contractors with commercial projects, you want to make sure that the project that you're working on, say you're working on 10,000 square foot warehouse, right? You want to make sure all of those materials that are going into the finished project are protected. And a really good tip for everyone is get the policy before the project starts. If you try to get a work builder's risk policy, once you're underway, the options as far as carriers significantly decreases. So if you think about it, when you're starting a project, a construction project goes like that, right? Like you're starting the project, maybe there are some delays, so you're like a month off schedule, right? The insurance carrier wants to pick up on that easy money, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing going on. It's the start of the project. They want that. Then you start building, like digging the foundation, start putting up the structure, right? That's where you're actually paying for the coverage, right? What happens if this thing falls down? And then it tails off towards the end. The house is being built. We're finishing everything up. Maybe we're like finishing up some of the electrical or whatever, or the siding. So that's a good thing for people to know, is get the policy before you start. You're going to have more options. It's going to be cheaper than if you try to get the policy while you're actually building, if you can even get the policy.
Yeah.
You definitely can get a policy, but it's just going to be way more expensive.
All right. Gotcha. So I got a couple more questions for you. So one's just going to be about project deadlines when something does happen, and then the future of construction, insurance, and then we'll leave it with some words of wisdom. But when we're looking at construction, it's high stakes projects, it's tight deadlines, and your personal experience with the clients that you work with and stuff like that. How is the right insurance coverage played a role in making sure, hey, these companies are able to navigate these situations, these unexpected challenges, and still hit these project timelines if possible?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think as far as like certificates of insurance, if you're familiar with those, if someone's working on a project, and I think I talked about it a little bit earlier, but if you're a general contractor, you should always collect certificates of insurance from your subcontractor, not only to know that they're insured, but also because if you're subbing out, you want to have those so that you don't pay for their workers' compensation payroll. That's a different topic, but basically, if you sub out work and you don't have a certificate of insurance for a subcontractor, they can tack that payroll onto your workers' compensation premium because it's auditable. So coming back to what we're talking about, if you're looking to bid on a project and someone has specific insurance requirements, you want to make sure that you have the right coverage for the project. So they could say, we want you to have $1 million each occurrence, $2 million general aggregate for your general liability. We want a combined single limit of $1 million for your auto. We want a $5 million umbrella, and we want you to have $1 million limits for your workers' compensation, as well as to list this as additional insured. We want to have a waiver of subrogation. These are all things that you want to make sure that you have the right insurance agency where they have all of those things on your policy. And right when you need that certificate of insurance to start that job and to get paid, that's the main thing, is if you can't provide a certificate of insurance to whoever you're working for, you're not going to get paid until you can.
Mm-hmm.
That's where a good insurance program is going to help you out, and making sure that you align yourself with an agency that can quickly get you those certificates and that has ask the right questions to make sure that you have the coverage that you need for that project.
Good stuff, man. I've been in this space for 8 years now or something like that, in construction, the trades, and I'll tell you what, this is one of the more insightful conversations I've had about insurance for sure, man. So appreciate all the knowledge, man. But now I want to go into the future. All right, so it, everything's changing so quickly, right? With technology changing at the most rapid rate it ever has. You see all these new tools, new technology, and as these construction companies start to evolve as well, what do you see for their future needs when in terms of insurance coverage, especially just with how everything's changing with construction projects and project management and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think with increasing costs as far as the insurance landscape, we haven't really talked about it, but
Mm-hmm.
it's expensive out there. Insurance companies are feeling the pain. They Inflation has something to do with it, where costs are up for labor, for materials. The claims are getting way more expensive, so they're losing money, so they're upping the prices. So I think it's important that contractors take it seriously. Don't take the easy way out, right? If you're a roofer, don't accept a policy that has a roofing exclusion, even if the premium's going to jack it up from $2,500 to $12,000, right? Make sure that you're okay, and that in the worst case scenario, you're going to be protected. I think it's also important to have good software, such as calculating your payroll. So we haven't talked much about this, but general liability policies as well as workers' compensation is all auditable. So what does that mean? That means that someone's going to come in and look at all of your books, right? Who's this payment that you made to this person? Oh, that's a subcontractor. Do you have their certificate of insurance? No, you don't. Okay, we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna we're gonna put it into this payroll, right? What do they do on that job? Say you're a carpenter and you're say you're a carpenter and you're outsourcing someone to do the roofing, but you don't get their certificate of insurance. They can take, and this is getting a little in the weeds, it's all based on class codes, right? So carpentry is going to be a lower rate as far as how much you're charged for your premium than roofing is. Why? Carpentry is it's less risky than roofing. Long story short, if you can't produce that certificate of insurance or you can't break out that payroll appropriately, they have every right to say, hey, we don't know what this risk is anymore. We're going to lump all your payroll into roofing. You get that audit back, you owe $10,000 when you thought that you were going to pay $4,000. You're like, hey, I don't do any roofing. I subcontract roofing out. What's this about? You want to make sure
Yeah.
that take the subcontractor out of that equation. You want to make sure that come audit time, you have a system that shows we paid this much to these employees for this type of work. They worked on interior carpentry for 8 hours this day, and we paid them this much money. We we did landscaping outside, general landscaping. We just cut the lawn, and we paid them this much over 4 hours. You want to get that detailed, and you want to take the time to do that, because ultimately you're going to save yourself. We're not talking like a couple $100s. We're talking like tens of thousands of dollars. And that's something that our agency strives for, is any way that we can help our clients to save as much money as possible. That's in their best interest. And we have a ton of experience working through audits like that. And that's something that a good agency like Tonry Insurance would be able to help out.
I think this is a good time right here to what's the best way to reach out to you? So if people need help with any of the topics that we covered, or they need any kind of insurance coverage and protection, what's the best way to get a hold of you, James?
Yeah. So my email is jtasca, JTASCA at Tonry, TONRY.com. My phone number is 617-249-1045. Just feel free to reach out, shoot me an email, give me a call, shoot me a text, whatever. Our agency is ready to help anybody.
Can you say your phone number just one more time, James, just in case?
617-249-1045.
Perfect. Thank you, buddy. All right. So, first off, I appreciate you coming in, all right, and coming on the show. It's a long time coming. I know that you've been watching the podcast for a long time and been a big supporter. So it's fun to be in the same space together, both working with people in the trades. It's exciting stuff, man. So I appreciate that. But I want to have you leave us with some words of wisdom. All right. So this could be from any part of your career, any experience that you have in tech, insurance, or any kind of guiding principles that you want to just leave our viewers with.
Yeah, I'd say love what you do. Take the time to slow down, make sure you do it right. Use your network. Your network is your net worth. I heard that from a good friend of mine, Nick Peret.
Yeah, I made that quote, man. I said that first.
Use your network. Yeah. Reach out to as
big.
many people as possible. Everybody wants to see everybody succeed. I think we're in tough times right now. We have been the past few years, but there's always another side, and just keep pushing through, right?
Mm-hmm. And I love that you said that, right? To use your network, leverage that, because successful people want to help out other people who need help or are looking for advice, right? If you know that people are successful in certain areas and you want to learn more about them, or you think that they might have a network that could open up some opportunities for you, tap into that, because they most likely get to that point once they're that successful that they want to give back, right? And they want to help others. I see it all the time. So make sure that you tap into that. But James, man, it has been an absolute pleasure. But this wraps up another episode of Construction Tech Talk. So I want to give another huge thank you to James Tasca for joining us today and sharing his valuable insights into the world of construction insurance, which can be a very confusing place to be. So he really shined a light on that, right? So James' journey from tech industry to insurance is a powerful reminder of how diverse experiences can really enrich your approach to whatever trade or space that you're in, right? Driving innovation and offering new solutions to age-old challenges. To our listeners, we hope you really enjoyed the conversation and really understand this space more. Make sure that you're reaching out to James. I know that him and the agency can help you guys out a lot, right? And I hope this inspired you to think differently about risk management, protection of your projects and your company and your people. Remember, the right insurance is not only a safeguard, but also empowers you to build confidently. So stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore the intersection of construction and technology, bringing you the knowledge and inspiration you need to tackle the challenges of tomorrow. I'm Nick Peret. Thank you for joining us. And remember, you're building the future. This is Construction Tech Talk signing off. Boom, bro.